Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Wednesday, January the 28th. Great opportunity today to meet a new friend and introduce somebody new to our podcast. One of the benefits of writing for American Thinker, and I guess I've been doing that for 10 years now. It kind of goes back a while. One of the benefits is that you get to post and you get to have people read it, but then you also get to read what other people write. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to meet many friends and make new friends who write for American Thinker. And one of them is John Green, that we're introducing today. John graduated from Purdue University as an engineer. And along the way, he ended up writing for several sites, including American Thinker and a few others. So let me introduce John Green. He's right there. How are you, John?
Very good. How are you today, Silvio?
Great. It's a great honor to have you.
It's my honor.
And you wrote for, I mean, you've written for, you're an engineer originally, right? What kind of engineering did you graduate? What kind of
Mechanical
degree?
engineering.
Mechanical engineer.
Mechanical.
Okay.
I did spend a lot of time in oil field exploration and defense systems.
So why did so many mechanical engineers become great political writers?
I guess I wasn't even aware that that was the case. A lot of
Well,
mechanical.
I was saying that as in a humorous way
Yeah.
because, but it does seem like I meet a lot of engineers through American Thinker who've decided to give us their political views. I've met quite a few over time. So you went to Purdue University, which is of
Yeah.
course the Boilermakers, right? The
That's
Boilermakers,
correct.
yeah, the Boilermakers, and who I believe were in made it pretty deep this year in the college playoffs, didn't they? I think they got
Yes.
into the finals, didn't they, or the playoffs, as they like to
Yeah.
call them? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as I said, over the years, I've read a lot of stuff at American Thinker, and the other day, I guess about a couple of weeks ago, I read your article, and I was fascinated by it because it came at I've been reading so much about women protesting and liberal women showing up at all these marches, and in some cases being awfully radical and unruly. And I read your article, and it just seemed to, as I say, hit the right tone because this is something that other people are writing about, talking about, and that is the number of women who've all of a sudden decided to get actively involved in politics. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but so many of them, especially on the liberal side, seem to be awfully emotional and very passionate about their politics. And as you point out in your article, sometimes there's a little double standard because they seem to vote for people who have done some of the things that they criticize Trump for doing, such as deportation and all of that kind of stuff. So just tell me why you decided to write this article. What inspired you to write this article? Was it seeing all those women marching, or what triggered your interest in writing this article?
Well, the thing that triggered it was a close personal friend of ours who lives in the Minneapolis area did a Facebook posting that was particularly incendiary towards ICE, and we know this woman. I call her Jane in the article. That's not her real name, but we know her quite well. She's a close family friend, and she's really a very good person. But when it comes to Donald Trump, she has an absolute blind spot. And I was just struck by the absolute cognitive dissonance of the whole thing. I happen to know that Jane is anti illegal immigration. She is anti abortion. She's pro fiscal responsibility, and yet she votes for Democrats every election. And she's particularly inflamed about what's going on with ICE in the Twin Cities right now.
What is it? And I'm just thinking out loud. Is it because, let's say, Trump is such a masculine man, or because, I mean, Bush, I guess, was the same way. George W. These are sort of men who are very masculine and very traditional in their ways. Do you think that's what triggers this?
I don't know. I've had a few political discussions with Jane, and we tend to try to stay away from it to maintain harmony with our friendships. But the few times I've talked to her, it always comes down to, I just hate Donald Trump so much. I just hate Donald Trump so much. And she cannot accept anything he does just because she detests the man.
Right. Right. And I've heard that from other people too. I have a friend who I went to high school with. Nice man, very nice man. I like him a lot. And he's the same way. I mean, he is constantly sending me emails and opinions. And, sometimes he'll send me like 10 things a day of, things that he hates about Trump.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, I sent him, in fact, today I sent him a note saying, you know what? I love the fact that you hate Trump, or I accept the fact that you hate Trump, but we're not going to get anywhere. And as I told him, and I always tell everybody, it's not that I love Trump. It's not a question of loving Trump. I didn't even support him back in 2016. I had different people in mind. I didn't, honestly, I didn't think he was going to be a good candidate back in 2016. I thought he would lose, which is why I was, for the more traditional Republican.
Yeah, I was a Ted Cruz fan myself.
Yeah, well, I actually voted for Marco Rubio in the Texas primary.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly thought that a ticket of, let's say, John Kasich and Marco Rubio or something like that would be a very good ticket because, well, not only that, but you got Florida and you got Ohio in the mix. So, I mean, I was one of those who in 2016, I voted for him for president, but that's because of the alternative, really. I mean, to me, the alternative of Hillary Clinton was unacceptable. So I couldn't think of that. I mean, I just couldn't do that to the country.
Right.
And I couldn't wake up the next morning after the election and say, oh my gosh, I contributed to this. So it was her choice more than anything else. So I guess you could say that in that election, I hated Hillary Clinton,
Yeah.
more but so when he became president, he's been surprising me so much in the job that he's doing. I mean, just the fact that he has either by good luck, good fortune, whatever, put 3 justices in the Supreme Court. Now, timing has a lot to do with that. I understand. But he's put 3 excellent judges in the Supreme Court who I think have been a benefit to the country having a court like that. I think his foreign policy was very wise. Economic decisions are very wise. And it seems to me that he's become a pretty good president in my eyes all of a sudden. And, we may see in the next 12 months, not only the collapse of Iran, but the collapse of Venezuela, the collapse of Cuba, things that would have been unthinkable before. So he's been doing a lot of things right. And with immigration, my feeling is I came to this country with my parents. I'm a legal immigrant. I became a U.S. citizen the right way. And my feeling has always been all along, let's have legal immigration. But this idea of opening the borders, unchecked immigration, that is not healthy for the country. So that's how I see him, as a man with tremendous common sense in what he does. And the reaction, like this lady that you talk about in your article, is, okay, so you hate him, but give me a rational reason why you hate him. What don't you like about him? And so it's got to be something about his personality, John, that just throws these people off.
Well, she's not interested in rational arguments. That's the problem. And unfortunately, you can't win an emotional debate with rational arguments. That's just the reality.
Well, that's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate that's the way it is. And unfortunately as well, a lot of those women are marching. We've seen them in Minneapolis. We've seen them in other places. And this woman who unfortunately was killed by Robin Good or whatever her name was? Renee Good.
Right.
Look, I hate that she got killed, but then she puts herself in that situation. It's just like this other fellow who was killed Saturday morning, whatever his name is, Petrie or whatever. I hate that he was killed, but if you put yourself in front of a train, don't blame the train for running you over. I mean, these people are putting themselves at risk, making some very bad decisions, and then we're blaming ICE. I mean, you write so well about this in your article, about how these ICE officers are doing a very difficult job, and then these people step in interfering with their job. Well, that's not a good thing. If you're a citizen, you don't get to interfere with police operations, John.
Well, they're being used as cannon fodder by the leftists. They're being sent out to sacrifice themselves to create a narrative. And unfortunately, there's far too many of them that are just so emotional about this issue that they're willing to do that.
Well, I also fault the local government there in
Very much
Minneapolis
so. Very much so.
because you don't see this in Texas. You don't see this in Florida. You don't see this in these operations they just had in Louisiana or in Tennessee. In fact, here in Texas, the governor made it very clear. He said, look, you can protest all you want. That's your right. You can protest. But don't touch a police officer. Don't interfere with their operations or their whatever they're doing. Do not block traffic because, innocent people do not have to be, offended by this or upset by this. And don't go into restaurants or into businesses, a bunch of women show up in Target. Did you hear about that? They show up in a
Yes, they did.
Target in Minneapolis, and
Restaurants.
yeah, and they fill their cart with stuff, and then they get to the counter and they say, "Well, we don't really want this. Let me give it back to you." And a bunch of people are doing that. That's insane. That's not rational protest. So this is, what this is why I think this is going to backfire on them, John. I mean, if the Democrats think this is going to be a great strategy, I don't think so because my feeling, and as I say, I look at this, try to be as objective as I can. I don't want to see people getting killed, but at the same time, I want the police to be respected. I want the police to be respected, John.
The problem is they're trying to affect the mood of the country, and to a certain extent, they're making progress in that. There was a CBS News poll that came out last week that showed that support for Donald Trump's immigration policies has dropped about 5 points in the last month. And when they ask people why, it's because not that they're against the deportation of illegal immigrants, but because they're offended by how harsh the tactics are. But they're using the tactics they have to use because the local authorities aren't giving them any other choice.
Right.
But every time Donald Trump's polling goes down by even a few percentage points, that's considered a victory by the people on the left. They know they're getting close to tipping the scales every time that happens.
And I think you're exactly right. I think that is the objective. The objective is to create chaos and demonize ICE by creating this chaos. Now, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in both Minneapolis and Minnesota, I think you have two other issues there that are very interesting. One is, of course, that the governor and the mayor of Minneapolis may be violating federal law. In fact, I think they are by not respecting federal law. Yeah,
and the attorney general.
And the attorney general. So these people, I understand they've been subpoenaed. They may there may be a grand jury out there listening to some information about them. So I think that's number one. And number two, you've got this money stealing or fraud case, sort of in the background. It's sort of like behind the curtain. And they're doing everything they can not to talk about that. And I think that this whole immigration debate and may very well be the curtain that they're using to keep that big, big problem away from.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Did you hear? And I'm not familiar with Snapchat. I don't. I mean, I've heard about it, but I don't use it.
Yeah.
I don't use any of it. But did you hear that they've apparently uncovered? I don't know how they did it, but they've apparently uncovered some texts or messages that would suggest that maybe some members of the Minnesota government were cooperating with these demonstrators. That could be a real problem legally for them, John. Isn't that true?
Oh, totally. Actually, the app was Signal Chat.
Signal Chat, okay.
Apparently, it's an encrypted texting app, which is supposedly secure. But of course, the United States government's probably got the best code breaking capability in the world, and they've discovered that Minnesota government authorities were sharing like locations and objectives of ICE agents, and it may implicate even all the way up to the lieutenant governor's office in Minnesota.
Who I believe is running for something, right? I think she's running for governor or senator, right?
She's running for the open Senate seat in Minnesota.
Yes. Okay.
That could be hugely illegal if that's what's
right.
going on.
That could be because, obviously they're not supposed to be doing that. I mean, I also think that there's almost like a lack of respect and a lack of humanity on the part of these government officials who don't seem to care the risk that the ICE agents are being put in. I mean, the idea that, and the protesters, yeah. So, for example, on Saturday, in that famous incident where this fellow Petrie was killed, I'm not an expert on videos, and that's not up to me to decide what happened. But I do see a video where I see a man confronting ICE agents who are doing their job. Completely legal what they're doing. Obviously, when you're doing a job like what they're doing, it's a very tense job because you don't know. I mean, they're not looking for grandmothers in this operation. They're
Right.
looking for people who could be armed and probably will use the weapons against them if they can. So it's already a very tense operation to begin with. So in the middle of this comes a man running toward them. Look, I'm a police officer in that situation. I'm scared because I think, what is this guy doing? Is he going to blow up in front of me? Is he going to blow up in front of me? Is this a suicide? I mean, all kinds of possibilities that are going to be thinking about. The other problem is the environment in which they're doing business. They know that if that had been Austin, Texas, that man would have never crossed the protest line, because in Austin, Texas, the police would have arrested him before he got within 100 feet of the agent. So they know they're operating in a field, like my late mother used to say, where you've got two strikes against you, because they're completely unprotected. It's them against the world, and the people who are protesting against them are not exactly saying nice things about them. So they have every reason to fear anybody who runs toward them. So this guy runs toward them
in a rational fashion.
Yeah. So this guy runs into them. They get into an altercation. Now that's another signal if you're a police officer, because if you're a police officer and you tell somebody to stop and they don't stop, that's another reason to fear for your life.
Well, let's back it up one. The same guy that the ICE agents shot had been in an altercation with the ICE agents about a week previously. In fact, it was a physical altercation in which he had been shoved to the ground and supposedly broke a rib. If Minnesota local authorities were doing their job, he would have been in jail for assaulting a police officer and would have never been there to have been shot this past weekend. But
and you're right. And
released, he went back out and did it some more.
Yeah. And again, I was on a network last night, a Spanish network, and we were talking about, they bring up the NRA, and they say, look, the NRA said that he's entitled to have a gun. And I said, yeah, that's what they said. I like the NRA. I'm not a member, but I'm a big supporter of the NRA. And but the NRA also said that you're not supposed to interfere in police operations. So, you can carry a gun, but you're not supposed to rush toward a police unit doing their job. And that part, of course, of what the NRA said, they don't repeat. They don't tell you that.
Right.
But the reality is that, to me, the problem here is that this man was interfering with a police operation, and his behavior in the context of what's happening in Minneapolis, where these officers know that they're not going to be protected by the local police. Officers have a right to think the worst. I would if I was in their shoes, and I'm not a police officer, John. So I mean, I think that these police officers, I'm kind of surprised they reacted as easy as they did, honestly. When you think about it, yeah, there was a shot, and I have no idea. I mean, look, I'm not an expert on that stuff, and I like to see a real expert tell me what happened. I don't want to hear people who are politically motivated tell me what happened. But eventually, somebody's going to look at that video, and they're going to tell us how that gun was fired, and we'll see what happens at that point, John.
And let's not forget that a federal judge in Minneapolis issued a ruling a couple of weeks ago prohibiting ICE from using non-lethal means of crowd control. Well, what do police officers resort to when they're prevented from using non-lethal means? They use lethal means.
Well, yeah, they use their fist also to to protect themselves, which is
They were told they couldn't use tear gas, pepper spray,
right.
or tasers.
Let me ask you another question. This is a bit of speculation, but I'll speculate, and I like to hear if you agree with me. I bet you the Minneapolis police officers are furious that they're not allowed to protect their fellow officers in ICE. If I know anything about the police, and I have a couple of good friends at church who were police officers here in the area. One of them was the coach of one of my sons when they were playing soccer, back many years ago. And although I've never spoken to them about Minneapolis, there's a great brotherhood when it comes to the police. And I bet you that there's a lot of police officers in Minneapolis who are very angry that they cannot defend their fellow officers. Again, that's speculation on my part, but I'll put it out there because I believe it's true, John.
Actually, I know quite a few police officers because I used to be a volunteer with the sheriff's department in St. Paul. And although I've never been a certified law enforcement person myself, I was familiar with quite a few deputies. And they are extremely offended by not being allowed to, defend their brethren. And then there's also an awful lot of the George Floyd fallout still going on as well. They're afraid to do their jobs because they could wind up in jail for doing their jobs. So
exactly, yeah,
that's
a very good point.
You've got a combination of frustration with city authorities for not letting them do their jobs and fear of a judicial system that could very well put them in prison.
Especially at the state level.
Yes, exactly.
Because that I think that's the reason the Democrats want to do this investigation in Minnesota, because they feel they kind of know the way it's going to end up if they do it in Minnesota. Whereas if it's a federal investigation, I feel a lot more confident, frankly, about the FBI doing it than some Minnesota judge doing it in Minnesota. But I feel, why do you think, just again, I'll speculate, and I like to hear from you as well. I think the reason that the mayor of Minneapolis is doing what he's doing, that is basically going against federal immigration law, is because politically he just wants to have a fight with Trump. It's a heck of a lot easier to have a fight with Trump than maybe explain to people why the city of Minneapolis, a city that I many years ago visited and absolutely fell in love with because it was so beautiful, all of a sudden isn't that way anymore. It's not that way anymore, Minneapolis. It's still a pretty city, of course, but there's a lot of crime, and I understand they have a shortage of police officers, which is not surprising after what happened with George Floyd. So, I mean, that's my speculation. Do you agree with me?
Absolutely. Post George Floyd, I think what I read is the city of Minneapolis lost something like 400 police officers. Either they resigned or took early retirement. So about 40% of the city of Minneapolis's police force is gone, and they've never been able to replace them. So
wow.
You couple that with the district attorney in Hennepin County is a woman named Moriarty. She's another Soros-backed district attorney, very light on crime. You couple that with the risk that the police officers are taking, the understaffing, and crime is just absolutely rampant in Minneapolis now. I mean, just 10 years ago, my wife and I would go on evening drives through downtown Minneapolis in the summer just to see the people and the lights. We would
Mhm.
never do that now. You'd get carjacked if you tried to do that now.
Right. Well, when I was there many years before you were there, well, no, I was there, I guess, in the 70s. I visited Minneapolis in the 70s with my parents. We used to go to watch baseball games at the old
The Met,
Bloomington or the Met and
yeah,
the Met Stadium, right? Metropolitan
yeah,
Stadium in Bloomington, which was, I believe, a suburb there,
yes.
not far or in the middle, I guess, of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And in fact, I remember staying at a motel called Thunderbird. I don't know if that's still there, but that's where our family stayed. I thought Minneapolis was an absolutely, I mean, almost like too good to be true kind of city. So beautiful, so majestic. St. Paul too, by the way. St. Paul was very nice as well.
Yeah.
And now I hear from friends that, like you're confirming, that no, it's not that way anymore. And it seems like every city the Democrats touch, they destroy.
Minneapolis was actually designed to be a city constructed around a network of interconnected parks. So you can actually travel throughout the whole Twin Cities on bike paths and walking paths because all these parks are interconnected. We were back there to visit my son this past October, and all the parks are filled with tent cities now. So the same thing is happening in Minneapolis as happened in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Now, of course, they clear out in the wintertime in Minneapolis, but they'll be back in the summer again
Yeah.
because the public officials don't care.
I remember when they had the George Floyd riots that a very big business in Minneapolis moved out. Uh, and yeah, and quite a few others, I guess, have moved out. Um, so when you look at the map of Minnesota, you see a totally red state with like two or three big lakes in blue.
Mhm.
Minneapolis, I guess Minneapolis, St. Paul, one of them. There's one at the top at the right hand. I don't know if that's Rochester up
Duluth,
there. It
Duluth,
is okay, yeah. But the
yeah,
rest of the state is red.
right.
And when you look at the results of the last three elections, in 16, Trump came within 1 point of winning.
Hmm.
2020 was a big Biden victory, but 2024, despite having the governor on the ballot, Trump came within, I think, 4 or 5 points of
Right.
winning, which must have been really embarrassing for Kamala Harris that happened. Um, what what can the people who live outside of Minneapolis do? Um, I mean, that's maybe a difficult question to answer. What can they do? Because they vote and they get outvoted by the other people.
Well, it's maybe they're getting outvoted and maybe they're not. You need to understand that voter fraud is a very real problem in Minnesota. But Minnesota does not have voter ID. They do have same day registration for voting. I don't know if you know how that works, but I've got a personal story. One in 2004, I went to the polls to vote for George W. Bush, and a school bus pulled into the parking lot, disgorged a bunch of people. They walked into the polling place, and half a dozen people went in with them and vouched for them so they could register to vote. So in Minnesota, you can vouch for up to 8 other people. You can just walk into the polling place with them and say, I hereby testify that they live in this district. You need to let them vote. And there are buses that take people to the polls, and the drivers walk in and vouch for them.
I mean, I guess that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. I just sometimes wonder what would the late Hubert Humphrey, who even though he was a Democrat, I liked Hubert Humphrey. I used to like him a
Yeah,
lot.
he's a
Uh,
conservative.
yeah, he was a nice guy. I mean, very nice. I mean, I guess you're right. He was not a wacko liberal. He was, well, he was a more traditional liberal. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But still conservative in personal matters and so on. But he had a great wife named Muriel. I'll never forget that story. Maybe I don't know how much you know about Hubert Humphrey, but I read a little bit about him. And Hubert Humphrey went to, when he was a young man, went to Washington on a trip, and he sent a postcard back to his girlfriend Muriel and said, "Dear Muriel, I'm here in Washington, D.C., and what a lovely place this is. And I'm going to marry you someday. We're going to live here." I thought that was such a neat story. And it's a true story. I've read his biography. So I was a big fan of Hubert Humphrey. And even Walter Mondale wasn't crazy like this. You know, I mean, he was a liberal, I know, but there are liberals and there are crazy people.
Insane.
Yeah. And somehow the party has been taken over by these people, well, that you're writing about in your article. The people that you're writing about in the article are the ones who seem to be running the party right now, John.
Now you've got Tim Waltz, Keith Ellison, Ilhan Omar. That defines Minnesota politics now.
Yes. You know, I wrote an article at American Thinker almost a year ago about Minnesota, and I called it, they're going to change the name of, they're going to call it the land of the 10,000 flakes.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be what's happening up there. Well, John, anything else you want to add? It's been such an interesting chat with you today.
I've enjoyed our talk.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us on short notice. Keep writing those great articles. And where else have you written? I know you said on that you've written in other places. What are some of the other places you've written?
I'm also a staff writer at America Free News Network, which is a bit of a smaller site than American Thinker, but they specifically avoid advertisers so that they don't have to get involved in censorship kind of things. And I'm also a content writer for Convention Estates in Idaho.
Oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting, especially that last one. I'd like to hear more about that someday. If you've got a mailing list, I would love to get on that mailing list. But one of the things I love writing an American Thinker are the comments that we get. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure I'm sure you got some interesting ones on this article that you wrote. I have a feeling I bet you got some interesting ladies who commented on the article that you wrote. And I mean, agreeing with you, I mean.
It's interesting. I've actually made quite a number of good friends just from people corresponding with me after reading some of those articles. And,
yeah.
I even had one gentleman that moved from Minnesota to Idaho after we corresponded.
Well, I reconnected with like 3 high school buddies because of American Thinker. I had literally lost touch with them.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they send me an email. Well, they went to the editor and got my email.
Yeah.
And they send me an email saying, "Are you Silvio from James Madison High School that I used to know?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, I'm the one from James Madison." So I've met three of my friends that way, and reconnected with other people too, because it's an amazing audience that they have at American Thinker. They're reaching an overwhelming number of people.
Got a broad circulation.
They really do, and so there's a lot of good people who read it, and a lot of people like yourself who write it. Well, or who write on it, I should say. John, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. How's the weather in Idaho?
We got a little dusting of snow today, but the sun came out and it's melting now.
Well, we had 3 days of inside the house because there was ice everywhere. I mean, I'm actually accustomed to cold weather because I lived in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So I know what cold weather is, but the cold weather down here in Texas is different. Because here we don't get the beautiful snow that you get up in Wisconsin. What we get here is ice.
Yeah.
It rains, and then for 2 days, it's nothing but ice. And you just can't move.
They don't know how to deal with it either.
No, they don't. And it's very dangerous, actually, to go out. So the whole thing shuts down. We haven't had schools for 3 days. This whole week, no schools.
How long have you been in Dallas?
Oh, my God, 40 years.
Okay. All right.
We moved here. Well, I moved here first, met my wife here. I moved here in 1984.
Okay.
I remember...
So you and I went in opposite directions.
Yeah.
In 83,
That's right.
I moved from Houston to Minnesota.
Oh, okay. All right. And then when did you move to Idaho?
2019.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, a few years ago. No, I've lived in this area. I have voted in this area since 1984. So my first vote in Texas for president was the reelection of Ronald Reagan. I remember that in 1984. And when I first came here in 1984, I got to tell you a little quick story. It just goes to show you how the political situation in Texas has changed. In 1984, I originally stayed with my parents until I got a chance to settle down. And I went to the office of the Republican Party. I wanted to find out who my congressman was. Turned out to be a fellow named Martin Frost. So I look at the map and I look at the district, and I said to the Republican guy at the office, "That's a really interesting looking district. I mean, who drew that?" And he said, "Well, the Democrats drew that for him so that he can get reelected because he was covering every ethnic group in the planet was in
Mhm.
his district." It looked like I mean, creative art wouldn't explain it correctly, but the thing was, I mean, and I said to myself, I guess that's called gerrymandering, right? And they
Yep.
said, yeah, that's what they do here. So that's why I find it amusing now that when the Republicans are doing it, they all get bent out of shape, but they're the ones who taught us how to do it. All right, John, thank you for your time.
Thank
And
you, Sylvia.
have a wonderful day. And I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Thank you so much. John Green from Utah, contributor to the American Thinker. As I said, we met as I've met many people who write at the American Thinker by just reading their stuff. American Thinker is a great place to find a lot of interesting articles, a lot of interesting topics. And John wrote an article talking about a family friend who, uh, one of these people who gets in, who just hates Trump. I mean, one of these I hate Trump people, and who loses all kinds of rational thinking because all they do is hate Trump. So anyway, very interesting article. So I contacted my friends at American Thinker and I said, "Hey, can you please put me in touch with John?" And they did, and here we are. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for listening. I do want to just say something real fast about On This Day in History. On this day in history, 1986, I remember this quite well. It was 40 years ago today that the Challenger exploded. And it was a very interesting day because my future wife, the lady that I would marry in July of 86, she and I went out to lunch. And as we got to the restaurant, the screen had this incident with the Challenger. And I said to the people there, "What happened?" And they said, "Oh, the Challenger exploded." So we were watching all of this, and what a horrible day that was. But that happened 40 years ago. And one of the greatest speeches of President Reagan's career happened that day, that speech that he gave where he spoke to the kids in that high school who had lost their teacher. So, well, anyway, a good day, but also a wonderful day to see the beauty of Ronald Reagan's rhetoric. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.